It's 1 a.m. on April 26, 1986, and the city of Pripyat is asleep. In apartment blocks lining Lesya Ukranka Boulevard, families rest beneath wool blankets. A baby stirs. A factory worker shifts in his bed, alarm set for 6 a.m. Outside, the streets are empty, lit by the pale glow of Soviet-era street lamps. A stray cat crosses the road. Pripyat is a young city. Founded in 1970, it was purpose-built for workers at the nearby Vladimir Lenin nuclear power plant, the most powerful nuclear facility in the Soviet Union. The average age of residents is just 26. Young engineers, young families, young children. The city has a fairground with a Ferris wheel scheduled to open in just 4 days. On May Day, there are schools and kindergartens, a sports stadium, a swimming pool, supermarkets stocked with goods unavailable elsewhere in the USSR. Pripyat is a showcase city, a symbol of Soviet progress, of the peaceful atom, of a glittering socialist future. Tonight, 49,360 people sleep soundly here. They do not know that 3 kilometers away, inside the 4th reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, an experiment is about to go catastrophically wrong. By morning, their city will be dying. Within 36 hours, every single person will be forced to leave forever. And over the weeks, months, and years that follow, the decisions made tonight by engineers, managers, and Soviet officials will poison a continent, kill thousands, and change the world. To understand what happened at Chernobyl, you first need to understand what made reactor number 4 so dangerous on that particular night. And to understand that, you need to understand the machine itself. The RBMK reactor was a Soviet design unique to the USSR, enormous, powerful, and in several critical ways, fundamentally flawed. Western nuclear engineers knew of some of its weaknesses. Soviet engineers knew too, though that knowledge was buried in classified reports that never reached the men operating the reactors day to day. The most dangerous flaw was something called a positive void coefficient. In simple terms, this meant that if the cooling water inside the reactor began to boil and turn to steam, rather than slowing the nuclear reaction down, as in Western designs, the RBMK reactor would speed up. More steam meant more power. More power meant more steam. A feedback loop with only one possible end. There was a second flaw, one that would prove directly fatal on the night of April 26th. The reactor's emergency shutdown system, the mechanism designed to stop a runaway reaction, was itself defective. When operators pressed the button to insert control rods and halt the reaction, the tips of those rods, made of graphite rather than neutron-absorbing material, would briefly accelerate the reaction before slowing it. A shutdown system that momentarily made things worse before making them better. Engineers called it the positive scram effect. They had identified this flaw. They had reported it. Nothing was changed. These 2 flaws, the positive void coefficient and the defective shutdown system, were known, documented, filed away. The men in Reactor 4's control room that night had never been told about either of them. The test, scheduled for April 25th and 26th, 1986, had been attempted 3 times before and failed all 3 times. The goal was straightforward in theory. In the event of a power outage, the nuclear plant needed backup power to run its cooling pumps for the 60 to 75 seconds it took for emergency diesel generators to start up. Engineers wondered whether the residual momentum of the plant's turbines, as they spun down, could generate enough electricity to bridge that gap. It was a safety test. The bitter irony. The test had originally been planned for the day shift, when the most experienced engineers were on duty. But the grid controller in Kiev needed the reactor's power through the afternoon. The test was delayed, and delayed again. By the time permission finally came through, it was nearly midnight and the night shift had taken over. Less experienced, less prepared, and about to run an experiment that their managers in Moscow and Kiev had not properly reviewed. Anatoly Dyatlov was the deputy chief engineer overseeing the test, aggressive, contemptuous of caution, feared by his subordinates. When an operator expressed concern about the reactor's condition, Dyatlov dismissed him. When another suggested they postpone, Dyatlov threatened his career. The test would proceed. Tonight. What happened next unfolded with the terrible precision of a machine designed to fail. At 1:05 a.m., operators began reducing the reactor's power in preparation for the test. The procedure required stabilizing power at between 700 and 1,000 megawatts thermal. During the reduction, an operator made an error. Power plummeted, not to 700 megawatts, not to 500. The reactor fell to 30 megawatts, barely alive, on the edge of shutdown. A responsible decision at this point would have been to abort. When a reactor falls to such low power, xenon gas, a byproduct of the nuclear reaction, builds up inside the core and acts as a poison, absorbing neutrons, making the reactor harder and harder to control. Operators call this xenon poisoning. The textbook response is to shut down and wait. Dyatlov refused. They would push power back up. They would run the test. To coax the reactor back to life, operators withdrew nearly all of the control rods from the core. These rods were the primary means of controlling the reaction. Pulling them out was like removing the brakes from a car on a mountain road. By 1:22 a.m., only 6 to 8 rods remained inserted in a reactor that required a minimum of 15 for safe operation. The reactor was now operating in a regime that its own design specifications explicitly prohibited. At 1:23 a.m. and 04 seconds, the test began. Operators reduced the flow of water to the turbine. Almost immediately, the cooling water in the reactor core began to boil. Steam built up. The positive void coefficient engaged. Power began to rise. At 1:23 a.m. and 40 seconds, Senior Reactor Control Engineer Leonid Toptunov saw what his instruments were telling him and felt the blood drain from his face. Power was not rising gradually, it was surging, exponentially, in seconds. At 1:23 a.m. and 43 seconds, Alexander Akimov, the shift foreman, shouted the order, emergency shutdown. Toptunov pressed the AZ5 button, the scram button, ordering all control rods to drop into the reactor simultaneously. The graphite tips entered the core first. The positive scram effect engaged. Power spiked to an estimated 30,000 megawatts, 10 times the reactor's maximum design capacity, in a fraction of a second. At 1:23 a.m. and 47 seconds, reactor number 4 exploded. For 10 days after the explosion, the destroyed reactor burned, not with conventional fire, but with something far more dangerous. The graphite moderator inside the core had ignited, and it burned at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius. Each day that it burned, it sent a fresh plume of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Iodine-131, cesium-137, strontium-90, plutonium, carried on the wind across Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and beyond. Soviet authorities tried everything to extinguish the core. Helicopters made over 1,800 sorties, dropping sand, lead, clay, and boron onto the reactor from above. The helicopter crews flew through a column of radioactive smoke. Many of them would develop serious health problems in the years that followed. The first helicopter to attempt the drops was caught in a thermal current and crashed, killing all 4 crew members. On the ground, miners were brought in from the Donbas region to dig a tunnel beneath the reactor to install a heat exchanger to prevent the molten core from burning through the base and contaminating the groundwater. They worked in suffocating heat, unable to use mechanical equipment because it kept breaking down in the radiation field. They worked in shifts of 3 hours. Many of them have since died. Their work, it was later determined, may not even have been necessary. But they did it without question. Hundreds of thousands of people, later called liquidators, were mobilized from across the Soviet Union. Soldiers, coal miners, construction workers, engineers. They worked to clean the roof of the adjacent reactor buildings, shoveling graphite and nuclear fuel by hand. They worked in contaminated zones. Many were given inadequate dosimeters or dosimeters that were calibrated to stop reading at a certain level so that their official exposure records would not exceed legal limits. The true doses many of them received will never be known. The official Soviet death toll from Chernobyl was 31. 31 people, they said, died as a direct result of the disaster. This number has been disputed ever since. The 2 workers killed in the initial explosion, the plant workers and first responders who died of acute radiation syndrome in the weeks that followed. 28 of them in all, most within 3 months, their bodies shutting down in sequence, their skin peeling, their organs failing, their bone marrow destroyed. Their deaths were documented, their suffering recorded in medical literature with clinical precision. But what of the thousands of liquidators who developed cancers in the years that followed? What of the children in Ukraine and Belarus who developed thyroid cancer at rates far above normal? The World Health Organization has estimated that ultimately the disaster may cause 4,000 additional cancer deaths among those most heavily exposed. Other researchers put the figure far higher, in the tens of thousands, when the broader affected population is considered. The true toll will never be precisely known because the Soviet Union suppressed data, because cancers take decades to appear, and because proving causation is difficult when a cancer is one among millions. 350,000 people were ultimately evacuated from the most contaminated areas. The exclusion zone around Chernobyl covers 2,600 square kilometers. It will remain uninhabitable for tens of thousands of years. The cesium-137 released by the explosion has a half-life of 30 years. The plutonium, 24,000 years. Sweden detected the radiation before the Soviet Union admitted anything had happened. Swedish nuclear plant workers were setting off radiation alarms on a Monday morning, April 28th. Swedish authorities traced the source. They confronted the Soviets. Only then did Moscow acknowledge, in a single-sentence broadcast on the evening news, that an accident had occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. No details, no warnings to populations downwind, no instructions to stop children from drinking milk, which by then was contaminated with iodine-131 across wide areas of Ukraine and Belarus. 6 men were put on trial in the summer of 1987. Viktor Bryukhanov, the plant director who had filed the false radiation report; Nikolai Fomin, the chief engineer; Anatoly Dyatlov, the deputy chief engineer who had driven the experiment forward despite all warnings; 3 shift supervisors and reactor section chiefs. They were convicted of criminal mismanagement and violation of safety regulations. Bryukhanov, Fomin, and Dyatlov each received the maximum sentence, 10 years in a labor camp. Dyatlov served 3 years before being released on health grounds. He died in 1995, insisting until the end that the accident was not his fault, that the reactor's design was to blame. On this point, he was not entirely wrong, because here is what the Soviet trial did not address. The RBMK reactor's flaws had been known to its designers for years. The positive void coefficient, the positive Scram effect, these were not secrets discovered after Chernobyl. They had been identified and reported and quietly set aside, because acknowledging them would mean acknowledging that dozens of reactors already operating across the Soviet Union were inherently dangerous. That was politically unacceptable. So the knowledge was buried. The scientists and bureaucrats who made those decisions were never put on trial. The system that created a culture in which operators were not told the truth about the machines they were running, in which expressing concern was a career risk, in which safety was subordinated to production targets, was never put on trial. 6 men went to labor camps. The system carried on. Not a single designer of the RBMK reactor was ever held legally accountable for Chernobyl. Today, the city of Pripyat stands exactly as its residents left it on April 27, 1986. The apartment blocks are still there, their windows broken, trees growing through the floors. The gymnasium still has its equipment, rusted in place. The school still has textbooks open on desks. In the amusement park, The Ferris wheel that never opened for a single ride still stands against the sky, yellow paint peeling, frozen in time. It has become the most photographed symbol of Chernobyl, a monument to a future that never came. The reactor itself is now enclosed beneath the new safe confinement, a vast steel arch 108 meters high, completed in 2016 at a cost of 1.5 billion euros. It is designed to last 100 years, then it will need to be replaced. The molten remains of the core, a mass of radioactive material called the elephant's foot because of its shape, still sits in the basement of Reactor 4. It emits enough radiation to kill an unprotected person within minutes. It will remain dangerously radioactive for centuries. A small population of elderly residents, mostly women, returned to the exclusion zone after the evacuation and refused to leave. The Soviet authorities gave up trying to remove them. These women, called self-settlers or samozli, tended their gardens, kept their animals, and lived alongside the contamination. Some of them have outlived the Soviet Union itself. They say they would rather die in their homes than live as refugees. Wildlife has returned to the exclusion zone in extraordinary numbers: wolves, lynx, brown bears, Przewalski's horses, bison. In the absence of humans, nature has reclaimed what was taken from it. Scientists debate whether the radiation causes long-term harm to animal populations. The animals, it seems, prefer the risk of radiation to the certainty of human civilization. Chernobyl did not just destroy a reactor and contaminate a landscape, it cracked the foundations of the Soviet Union itself. Mikhail Gorbachev later said that the disaster was perhaps the real cause of the USSR's collapse. More than any economic failure, more than any political opposition, Chernobyl demonstrated in unmistakable terms what the Soviet system actually was beneath its surface. A system built on lies, on the suppression of inconvenient truths, on the subordination of human lives to political imperatives. When Gorbachev introduced glasnost, openness, as a policy, it was partly in direct response to Chernobyl. He had seen what the culture of secrecy had wrought. He had seen what happened when the truth was suppressed until it could no longer be contained, until it exploded through the roof of a reactor and drifted on the wind across a continent. The lessons of Chernobyl are not only about nuclear power, they are about what happens when institutions prioritize the appearance of safety over actual safety. When workers are not empowered to stop a dangerous process. When the people in charge of a system have personal and political incentives to conceal its flaws. When accountability is selective and the most powerful remain untouchable. 28 first responders dead within months, their suffering a matter of record. Hundreds of thousands of liquidators, their fates still disputed. Tens of thousands of cancer cases across Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. 350,000 people displaced forever. A city of 49,360 people abandoned in a single afternoon, never to return. 0 reactor designers ever held accountable. 0 senior officials who buried the safety reports ever charged. 0 members of the Soviet nuclear establishment who knew about the reactor's flaws and said nothing ever faced justice. The Ferris wheel in Pripyat still turns slightly in the wind sometimes. Visitors photograph it. They call it haunting, eerie, beautiful in its decay. But it was supposed to carry children on their first ride on May 1st, 1986. Those children grew up somewhere else, if they grew up at all. Chernobyl was not an accident waiting to happen. It was a system failing in the way that system was designed to fail. The explosion was caused by human choices, by a reactor design that was knowingly flawed, by a culture that punished honesty and rewarded silence, by managers who drove frightened engineers past every safety boundary, by officials who chose their careers over the lives of 49,360 people sleeping in the dark 3 kilometers away. It wasn't the atom that killed them. It was the lie.